At 2:07 a.m., 35,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, cabin lights dimmed to simulate nighttime for sleeping passengers. Flight 447 from Miami to Sao Paulo hummed steadily through the darkness. In the first-class galley, a lone flight attendant slipped past the beverage cart and approached the reinforced safe built into the aircraft's wall, a compartment normally off-limits to crew during flight. Inside were three leather briefcases, each stamped with a discreet LX logo, containing bundles of cash totaling $12 million in cartel bribe money destined for foreign officials. Within 3 minutes, every bundle was gone, replaced with identical newspaper props wrapped in authentic currency bands so the pilots conducting their post-flight inspection would never notice the difference. She had been serving drinks and peanuts for 10 years, maintaining a spotless record with Skylink Airlines. Tonight, she served herself the biggest score in aviation history. Before I walk you through the full story, I just have a small favor to ask. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and let me know in the comments. What city are you watching from? It's always amazing to see how far this audience is reaching. 2 weeks earlier, Elena Cruz was working her regular shift on Flight 901, the mid-Atlantic route she knew by heart. The 32-year-old flight attendant had built her reputation on discretion and reliability, qualities that made her the preferred crew member for VIP passengers who valued privacy above comfort. That particular evening, she was assigned to a hush-hush entourage from what she later learned was the 60 Cartel, businessmen in expensive suits who spoke in hushed Spanish and carried themselves with the quiet confidence of people accustomed to getting their way. Elena had served these types before. Private charter passengers, corporate executives, politicians. All of them shared the same expectation that their conversations would remain unheard and their activities unobserved. She was good at being invisible. Elena Cruz had immigrated to the United States as a child, following her parents who sought better opportunities in Miami's growing aviation industry. Her father worked ground crew at the airport for 30 years before retiring, and her mother cleaned offices in the terminal building. Elena spoke perfect English with just a hint of her Colombian accent, and she understood that her job was about more than serving drinks. She was a professional who happened to work at 35,000 feet. A second-generation immigrant, she carried the weight of her family's sacrifices and the responsibility of building something better for her own son. 10 years with Skylink Airlines had given her a spotless employment record, commendations for customer service, and the trust of management. She was the kind of employee who never called in sick, never complained about overtime, and never asked questions about unusual cargo or passenger requests. The triggering event came during her conversation with one of the cartel VIPs. He had been drinking steadily since takeoff, and his usual caution had dissolved into casual bragging. In broken English, mixed with Spanish, he mentioned routine bribes worth millions, stored securely for transport to their next destination. Elena's training had taught her to smile, nod, and forget everything passengers said during flights. But this time, she couldn't forget. Her 8-year-old son, Miguel, needed surgery to correct a congenital heart defect. The procedure would cost $200,000, and their insurance company had denied coverage, claiming it was a pre-existing condition. Elena had exhausted her savings, borrowed against her retirement fund, and was facing bankruptcy. She had 2 jobs, flight attendant during the day and hotel housekeeping at night, but it wasn't enough. The cartel passengers' casual mention of millions in cash felt like a cruel joke from the universe. Elena's rationalization came gradually, then all at once. These weren't good people losing their money. This was cartel cash, bribe money intended to corrupt foreign officials and facilitate drug trafficking. If she took it, she would be stealing from criminals who had stolen from countless others. Miguel's surgery would save his life, and the money would disappear into legitimate medical expenses. She told herself that she was simply redirecting criminal funds toward a moral purpose. More importantly, she was trusted. In 10 years of service, she had never given management a reason to doubt her integrity. No one would ever suspect the quiet, reliable flight attendant who had served drinks to presidents and celebrities without incident. Elena began her reconnaissance the next day, studying Skylink's cargo protocols with the methodical attention of someone whose child's life depended on understanding every detail. Private shipments from VIP passengers were stored in a locked safe behind the first-class galley. Only the cockpit crew and the purser had access codes, changed monthly according to company security procedures. The safe was monitored by the aircraft's internal security system, but Elena had noticed that CCTV coverage focused on passenger areas and the main cargo hold. The galley safe was in a blind spot, visible only when crew members were actively working in the area. Security sweeps occurred after landing, when ground crews inspected the aircraft and verified that all cargo had been properly secured during flight. Over the following weeks, Elena observed everything. She memorized the pilot's routine of checking the safe before takeoff and after landing. She noted the exact time when the cockpit crew performed their security sweep, usually during the final descent, when passengers were required to return to their seats. She studied the CCTV system's operating schedule and discovered that cameras were automatically disabled during specific maintenance windows to prevent interference with electrical systems. Elena learned that the safe's backup key was stored in the aircraft's emergency kit, accessible to senior crew members in case of technical malfunction. She also realized that her position as a trusted employee gave her access to information that would be impossible for an outsider to obtain. Elena's preparation required more than observation. She needed tools and allies, though she was careful to avoid involving anyone in her actual plan. She modified her uniform belt to include a concealed pouch capable of holding $12 million in cash without creating obvious bulk. The modification was subtle, a reinforced inner lining that distributed weight evenly and maintained the belt's normal appearance. Elena also cultivated a friendship with Sarah, a junior flight attendant who was eager to please senior staff and prove her competence. Sarah was hardworking but naive, exactly the kind of person who would follow instructions without asking questions. Elena never told Sarah about her plan, but she began positioning herself as a mentor who could provide guidance about proper procedures. Elena's most dangerous acquisition was obtaining a replica safe key from Marcus, a disgruntled ground technician who had been passed over for promotion 3 times. Marcus had access to the maintenance codes and key specifications, but he believed Elena needed the information for a security audit requested by management. She convinced him that she was helping to identify vulnerabilities in the aircraft's security system. Marcus provided detailed specifications for the safe's locking mechanism and access codes, believing he was contributing to legitimate security testing. Elena used this information to have a duplicate key manufactured by a locksmith who specialized in high-security applications. The entire process took 6 weeks of careful relationship building and misdirection. Elena's contingency planning covered every scenario she could imagine. If the safe's access code was changed unexpectedly, she would use the duplicate key. If the CCTV system remained active during her planned window, she would trigger a false emergency that would require immediate attention from the cockpit crew. If other flight attendants were present in the galley, she would create a distraction that would draw them away from the safe. Elena also prepared for the possibility that the cash might be counted or verified during the flight, though her research suggested this was unlikely given the nature of the cargo. She practiced her movements until she could open the safe, transfer the money, and reseal the compartment in under 3 minutes. Flight 447 on June 12th was a routine overnight service from Miami to São Paulo, carrying mostly business travelers and a few tourists. Elena had volunteered for this specific flight after learning through her cartel contacts that it would be carrying another large cash shipment. The aircraft was a Boeing 777 with a crew of 12, including 4 flight attendants. Elena was assigned to first-class service, which gave her legitimate access to the galley where the safe was located. She had studied the passenger manifest and knew that most travelers would be sleeping during the critical window between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., when the cabin lights were dimmed and crew activity was minimal. At exactly 2 a.m., Elena announced over the intercom that snack service would begin shortly for passengers who were awake. This was standard procedure for overnight flights, and it provided cover for her movement throughout the aircraft. She prepared a serving cart with crackers, fruit, and beverages, then positioned herself in the first-class galley. The cockpit crew was focused on navigation and routine communications with air traffic control. Her fellow flight attendants were either resting in the crew quarters or attending to passengers in economy class. Elena checked her watch and confirmed that the aircraft's maintenance window had disabled the CCTV system as scheduled. At 2:02 a.m., Elena approached the safe with the confidence of someone who belonged there. She had memorized the access code during her weeks of observation, and her hands moved without hesitation as she entered the 6-digit sequence. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing 3 leather briefcases exactly as the cartel passenger had described. Each case contained bundles of cash wrapped in currency bands marked with denominations and quantities. Elena had prepared newspaper bundles of identical size and weight, complete with authentic currency bands obtained from a bank contact who believed she was conducting a training exercise for airline security. Elena's movements were swift and precise. She transferred each bundle of cash from the briefcases to her concealed pouch, replacing them with the newspaper replicas. The fake bundles were virtually indistinguishable from the originals unless examined closely. Elena had practiced this exchange dozens of times in her apartment, timing herself until she could complete the transfer in under 3 minutes. She resealed the briefcases and returned them to the safe, then closed the compartment and reset the access code. The entire operation took exactly 2 minutes and 43 seconds. At 2:06 a.m., Elena signaled to Sarah, who was working in the economy cabin. Using their established communication system, Elena indicated that she needed assistance with a turbulence check, a routine procedure that required crew members to secure loose items and verify that passengers were safely seated. Sarah immediately announced the turbulence check over the intercom, which drew the cockpit crew's attention to their instruments and weather radar. This distraction provided Elena with additional cover as she disposed of the safe's access code notes and resumed her normal duties. By 2:08 a.m., Elena was serving drinks in first class, chatting pleasantly with the few passengers who were awake. She maintained her usual professional demeanor, showing no signs of stress or unusual behavior. The $12 million in cash was distributed throughout her modified uniform, creating no visible bulk or obvious weight distribution. Elena continued her shift for the remaining 4 hours of the flight, serving breakfast and preparing for landing in São Paulo. She had successfully completed the largest theft in aviation history, and no one suspected that anything had happened. Upon landing at São Paulo's Guarulhos International Airport, the standard cargo inspection protocol began immediately. The ground crew accessed the aircraft's secure areas, including the safe behind the first-class galley. When they opened the briefcases, they found what appeared to be the expected cash bundles, properly wrapped and secured. The newspaper replicas were so convincing that the initial inspection revealed no problems. It wasn't until the briefcases were transported to their final destination that the cartel discovered the theft. By then, Elena had already begun the next phase of her plan. The security investigation that followed was thorough, but ultimately fruitless. CCTV footage from the aircraft showed no unauthorized access to the galley safe area. The footage from the critical time frame was missing due to the scheduled maintenance window, but this was consistent with normal operations. Interviews with the cockpit crew revealed that they had followed standard procedures for checking the safe before takeoff and after landing. The pilots confirmed that the safe had been properly secured and that the briefcases appeared intact during both inspections. Elena and her fellow flight attendants were interviewed as part of the routine investigation. Elena's decade-long employment record and spotless reputation made her an unlikely suspect. She answered questions honestly about her duties during the flight, her interactions with passengers, and her knowledge of cargo procedures. Her responses were consistent with those of other crew members, and she showed no signs of deception or unusual behavior. The investigation focused primarily on ground crew and cargo handlers, who had more direct access to the aircraft's secure areas. The cartel's reaction to the theft was swift and furious. $12 million in bribe money represented months of careful planning and significant operational investment. The loss threatened important relationships with foreign officials and jeopardized ongoing business arrangements. The cartel issued bulletins to their network of contacts, offering substantial rewards for information about the theft. They pressured their lawyers to pursue every possible legal avenue for recovering the funds, though the criminal nature of the money made official law enforcement involvement impossible. Elena's escape plan had been months in the making. She had used her employee travel benefits to book a return flight to Miami, but she never boarded the aircraft. Instead, she had prepared false identification documents and purchased a separate ticket to São Paulo under an assumed name. Elena checked out of her crew quarters at the airport hotel, leaving behind most of her personal belongings to maintain the appearance of a normal departure. She had told her supervisors that she needed emergency leave to care for her sick son, a story that was consistent with her previous request for time off. Elena's money laundering strategy relied on her knowledge of São Paulo's underground economy, information she had gathered during years of international flights. She had identified a contact in the city's gem district who specialized in converting large amounts of cash into portable assets. The process required several weeks of careful transactions, but Elena was able to convert the majority of the $12 million into high-quality diamonds that could be easily transported and sold in other markets. She conducted these transactions through intermediaries, maintaining distance from the actual exchanges. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one.